What's up, y'all? Bill McNeil rocking the mic again, cold representing Rocket Fuel Malt Liquor. It's got the mad flavor that takes any situation to the next level. So when the party starts bouncing and the ladies start bumping, tighten up your flow with Rocket Fuel. Rocket Fuel Malt Liquor. Damn!
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and we are well into 2021. We've had a pretty big comic week. Last week, we got the beginning of Future State. We've got Kingdom Black kind of going full force over at Marvel. So we got a lot of things happening within the comic book industry. Got a lot of new information over the past few weeks, especially as far as DC Comics goes. We have some ideas maybe what might happen at Marvel. But today, we're going to kind of do a forecast, what the outlook is for DC Comics moving into 2021. Basically, I have laid out a list of the five best the best case scenario, like 5 things that could happen that are the best case for DC Comics. Then we're going to talk about the 5 worst things that can happen. Then we're going to kind of talk about the most likely scenario, what's really probably going to happen for DC Comics. But these are kind of things you'll be looking out for if things are going well, if things aren't going well. Obviously, here with me to talk about that is El Percherito himself, the Poobah of Comics. Perch, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. And, I love forecasts, so this will be great.
Absolutely. So this should be a fun conversation. Now, before we get into this, I do want to say, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this, give me a thumbs down if you don't. I really want to hear your thoughts. What is your outlook for DC Comics moving into 2021? So here, let's add this to the show. And this is my best case scenario, Perch. This is readers absolutely embrace Infinite Frontier and the new strategies, specifically involving price. They're throwing backup stories, throwing an extra dollar on all the big comics, your Batman, Superman, Justice League, Wonder Woman. They're also doing a lot more emphasis as far as anthology books. And it turns out, DC's gamble is right. Readers are more attached to the characters rather than the talent. Obviously, they are going a little bit cheaper. We're seeing established DC talent kind of being put on the back burner or doing stuff on indies. Their production quality starts to return to normal. Obviously, there's been a big churn at DC Comics recently. We're starting to see production errors as far as printing and things like that. Those kind of start going away as the new people in those positions or people that have been moved over start to get better acquainted and things kind of get back to normal. And they also see steady growth in YA and digital. Obviously, these are the new directions, the new focuses of DC Comics as they kind of turn their eye away from the direct market into these new emerging markets that they might be a little late to. And also that the synergy across the medium starts to attract new readers to DC Comics. They're starting to make sure that DC Comics more reflect what's going on in the Arrowverse, what more reflects what's going on HBO Max, and obviously the DCEU, at Warner Brothers at large. What do you think about this? Is this the best case scenario? Is there anything that I missed, Perch?
No, I think this is pretty right. I think there's a couple additions. I think in addition to YA and digital, DC's starting to play with manga. I think that's another area where they want to have a foothold, both in this country and out. So I think that's a place that they do want to play ball in and have some growth there and not just seed it to a different audience. I think the other one is that they want the synergy across mediums to attract readers. I think they want to see a really nice connection between the two. What they want to do is be able to say, put out a show, see a bump in comics, or more see the show get adopted faster and better because people are aware of the comics. I doubt anybody at AT&T Warner Media is looking at this saying, hey, we're going to put out Wonder Woman. Let's see a 5% jump in Wonder Woman comic sales. That's not, it's too low money. That's not how they're going to do it. But what they do want to do is say, hey, we see that the line seems to be operating smoothly, that people are communicating, that, when I pick up a comic book, it feels like the movie, and the movie, that this universe is coherent. I think more than anything, they want to feel like the marketing efforts are tied together nicely. And so I think this is their best case scenario. I mean, obviously, sales, they want to see that Future State that's going on right now does better than expected. It was seen as a kind of a dumping ground of comics of, hey, we had some ideas. Let's just get these things that we've already got some art for out there. They would love to see some gains in those and have that lead toward, bigger numbers for Infinite Frontier. Maybe, I would guess that DC at this point is looking for stable numbers more than bigger numbers. They'd love bigger numbers for sure, but what they really want is just stable. And that would be their best case scenario.
It certainly feels like Future State has had more interest maybe than retailers had anticipated. It's already going back to a second printing. But from a lot of the retailers I know, now there's outliers. Obviously, Larry likes to go out on, kind of speculate on things like this, so he has good numbers for backstock and things like this. But it felt like a lot of retailers kind of under-ordered on Future State, and it's turned out that there was more interest. So that's a good sign moving forward.
It is, yeah. I mean, I think I put up a video and some people really wanted to argue with it, but you can't say that going to second printing is bad news. Now, granted, it's not like retailers are ordering hundreds of thousands of copies of these things, and then it has to go back to second printing because of that demand. It didn't have that demand because, as you're right, retailers under-ordered, and they under-ordered because when we went through this the last time with convergence, it did very terribly. So, any intelligent retailer would be cautious of going into this, especially with all the churn and everything else. They would typically order soft, and they saw that those soft orders were met with the demand. Most retailers are selling out. That's good news. Again, it doesn't mean everything is perfect by a long margin, but it means, if you as a retailer are estimating that you could move 100 copies and you sold out the first day, that's good news. Again, doesn't mean that you're selling out 1,000 copies. It just means, it's not a complete bust.
Absolutely. So is there anything else on this list right here that you think maybe is the most important thing to watch if you are someone that likes to watch the industry that looks like a good sign for DC?
Well, I think that first one. I think that the readers embracing kind of the new direction, new strategies, that they like these characters, that it's exciting to them. I think that's a pretty big one. I think with YA and digital and ultimately manga, they just want to see that they're starting to get a foothold. It doesn't need to be huge. Production quality, I mean, last week was better. But I mean, that's 1 week. So we have to see how that plays out over time. I expect there to be plenty of problems in the future because they have lost a lot of people. And I think the characters, not the talent, is a tough one because I think readers like talent. They want to go to people. So if you're a reader, I guess the best thing you're hoping for is that this new talent turns out to be good. I mean, that's probably the best outcome for you.
Absolutely. So let's move on to some of the worst case scenario stuff. These are the absolute worst things that could happen for DC Comics in 2021. Infinite Frontier and its new pricing strategy absolutely bombs. It kind of turns people off. They don't like the new idea of the omniverse or fluid continuity where everything matters because maybe they think nothing matters. The new talent kind of falls on its face. They didn't go out there and secure the right talents for the right characters. The production standards continue to decrease because they are a bare bones production staff now. They've cut a lot of the fat, as if they had any fat really left to cut anymore. We know there's going to be some more cuts here somewhat in the future, so they could absolutely continue to decline. Now, something that could be really bad if the first one happens, if the established talent that they put on the back burner takes their wares over to the indie market and they start hitting it big, well, maybe they don't need to come back. So that would that could definitely not work out in DC's favor. Also, if they end up reaching the YA market or the manga markets too late, and it's kind of already passed them by, they aren't able to grab that foothold, I think that would absolutely be a very bad sign for DC Comics. And also, if Warner Media, HBO Max kind of continue failing with this DCEU, it's been very hit and miss. It feels like Wonder Woman 1984 feels like a miss. So far, they put a lot of money into that. They put it on HBO Max, hoping that it would attract subscribers and get people excited. It doesn't feel like that's happened so far. So in my mind, that's the worst case scenario for DC Comics in 2021.
Yeah, I think for the comics, certainly that first one, Infinite Frontier. If basically we emerge out of, here's the crazy thing. What if we emerge out of Future State, where Future State had slightly better interest than expected, but when they revert back to the current time, it basically loses all the people who came in with Future State, and the people who were there before are already gone. That would be like the double whammy of just things go really badly. I think some of this new talent, they've got to build some new names off of it. The question is, are they going to take the risk of building up some big names that some of these new people who show some signs of talent? There are some people in there, but what's interesting is you look at people like Jolie Jones, who is certainly not new talent, and you kind of wonder, like, why isn't Jones promoted more? There really is this the idea of promoting the talent, pushing the talent is soft at DC right now, and it's really peculiar, both new and old. It's all strange. The production standards, is a problem. The third one, I think, is the big problem for DC and Marvel, frankly, for the big two in general. If some of this talent says, hey, I am going to hit the indies, and actually they get a foothold and it starts to do well and they figure it out, and that suddenly becomes a really viable force, that's obviously very bad for DC. It's very bad for Marvel, though, at this point. I mean, I think both companies have a risk of a lot of new talent, figuring out a way that doesn't include them. And probably right now is the moment where they have the best opportunity and shot to do that. Customers are interested in reading something. Now, that means that the established talent have to go out and actually, be big by producing work that people want. And I think that's a big question mark, because a lot of the people who have gone out and tried some of these books so far are, going for kind of more oddball ideas. Nobody is really giving this kind of group of 30-year-old, 40-year-old, long-term comic fans what they want. I mean, what they really, really want. I think that's an interesting opportunity for some creator to go out there and say, you know what, whether I like it or not, I'm just going to lean totally into what they keep asking for and do it. That would probably be a good idea. And I would argue they, in terms of the YA market, they are too late. So now it's just a matter of, is there anything to be gained? I mean, I'm holding the Scholastic here book fair newsletter that my kids brought home. There is not a Marvel or a DC book in it at all at this point. And that is, what is curious is there are some things from Disney in here, but absolutely nothing from Marvel or DC. They've completely, seeded it, and that's interesting. I mean, that's where a lot of ground's being fought right now.
And what do you think about, just the Warner Media, HBO Max kind of continue failing the characters? So you have these failed ideas that just have trickled down to the comic books. I think that would be awful, because even the long-time readers are kind of turned off, and you're not getting any new readers either.
Yeah, I think that's a big problem for them. It is, a lot is being kind of hooked onto this Snyder cut. We don't yet know if Warner Media and AT&T are happy with Wonder Woman or not. I've heard different stories. Further, there's some real optimism about what they saw in terms of how the launch went and people who went to it. I've heard that there's some pessimism in that the early numbers from the subs did not jump like they thought they would. So it's it would be good to know kind of how they ultimately think of that. But I think Zack Snyder's Justice League's out in March, I believe, or somewhere around that time frame.
March. Yeah,
and they need to see big things coming out of that for the service. And if it doesn't take, if this just feels like, oh, it's some more movies but nothing to get really excited about, that's bad news. That's obviously very bad news, particularly for comic readers. If a lot of the comics have kind of shifted the way they are to reflect the movies that Warner Media and AT&T start to have less confidence in, that's a big problem. And now that this problem, if it does fail, I mean, this isn't going to happen this year, that there would be dramatic action. They are committed to at least 2 years of trying this strategy out. But by around summer, fall, if it starts to, if nothing is really clicking or working, you're going to see a lot more reduction.
Now, is there anything else that you think that could happen with DC in 2021 that people should keep an eye on out, just for just a really bad sign, like that things maybe aren't working out with the new strategy?
Well, I mean, I think this is a good news, bad news thing I'll throw out there, but what we need to see from DC is that they're able to turn around kind of their image, their public relations, their marketing, whatever it happens to be. It will be a very bad sign if it is still like it is today, where there's really very spotty announcements. A lot of stuff just gets on the shoulders of the creators. The company doesn't seem to have control over its own image and marketing, and people are still continuing to speculate that the entire company is going to shut down in June, which I think with the print run and news and everything else, we can firmly say it's not going to happen in June. But if people are still talking about that, if that's still kind of the perception of DC, I think that indicates a huge failure for the company. They haven't been able to grab hold of their own image, and so that's a very worst case scenario, in the sense that if comic fans believe you're about to die, then whether you are or aren't, they're just going to start buying other things. They're going to leave you. And so
absolutely, yeah,
that I think is a big problem for them.
100%. Now let's get into what you and I consider to be the most likely scenario. Now, not everything that's good is going to happen. Not everything that's bad is going to happen. I do think the pricing strategy is going to backfire big time. I don't think people are ready or going to be happy to spend $5 for a Batman comic with an extra story that they didn't want to begin with. I don't think some of the new talent strategies were very wise. I don't see Mariko Tamaki working on Detective Comics, but maybe Jeffrey Thorne and some of the other writers. I think Stephanie Phillips seemed to show some signs that she understands Harley Quinn. Maybe some of those are going to work, some of them aren't going to work for certain. I don't know. I'm pessimistic about the DCEU. I don't like the Arrowverse. We haven't seen what DC has to offer as far as their TV shows on HBO Max, but I know this is the direction, but I'm not all for it because I don't think that Warner Brothers or Warner Media has really shown a good understanding of what DC is all about and what their readers want.
Well, no, I mean, and for Warner Media, it's like, are they showing a good understanding of what the market wants? I mean, at the end of the day, you could lose all the comic readers if you're producing a hugely popular TV show that the masses adopt. I mean, if you're able to pull that off and you didn't get the comic readers along for the ride, I mean, that'd be sad for the comic readers, but you'd still be happy from a profit standpoint. But right now, it's unclear if they've figured out the model. People love to make fun of it, and rightfully so. I get it, but the Marvel MCU style, that way of making movies happen, it clicked with a big percentage of the audience, and they like it. They kind of redefined what a summer popcorn movie was all about, and DC has not found their equivalent yet. So I think that is a problem that really transcends comics. It's a problem. I think that, all things considered, I do think the price is too high, but most likely what we're going to see is the sales numbers and I've been doing these sales analysis now for several months of looking at things. I suspect that we're going to see the Infinite Frontier come out and the sales will be very similar to what we saw from DC a year ago. I don't think it's going to go up. I don't think it's really going to go down. I think it's going to be pretty much exactly the same. I think Bendis' Justice League is going to sell pretty much on the nose what Scott Snyder's Justice League sold. The first issue will be higher. The sales will trickle down relatively quickly, and it will settle in by issue 6 to right about where Snyder's Justice League was, which was not great. I think Tynion's Batman's going to continue to be probably his strongest seller, and I suspect that Johnson's Superman will be pretty close to where Bendis' Superman was, even though I suspect I'm going to like that title a lot more with him on it. But I think the most likely scenario is the numbers really haven't changed, up or down. They will be the number 2 company. And again, the question will be: Does Warner Media and AT&T, are they happy with it being the number 2 company? I don't think anything they've done in digital or YA or manga's too early, but I'll go out on a limb. I don't think anything they've done there is going to move the needle one way or another. I don't think they've got a strategy for YA. I don't think that their digital. Digital. Nobody has a strategy for digital yet, and this isn't it yet either. So that sounds pessimistic, but think of it this way. If DC emerges through 2021, 2022 as being kind of right where they are in 2019, they're the number 2 comic company. They're producing money. They're probably in this strange situation where, they're not failing to the point that they have to be destroyed from AT&T's perspective, but they're not making enough money that anybody needs to bother with them either. They just kind of sit in the cracks and survive. To me, that's.
So what do you think about them getting control of their own image as far as their marketing? Are they going to finally take the advantage and get their own narrative out there rather than letting other people write their story?
6 months ago, this scenario I was absolutely wrong about. I think the hiring of Daniel Cherry, a guy who's arguably was hired to control the marketing narrative and be in charge of that, and he was very dominant in his previous companies for controlling that narrative. I would have made a very firm bet that was something you could count on, that it was going to get better because they brought in somebody specifically for that role. However, now almost 6 months in, or not, I guess 4 months in, that's not happening. It still is not happening. And I have very, very low optimism they're going to get control of anything. I can't tell if it's they just don't care. that they're fine with it being this way, and they don't see it as a priority to get control over it. But at the moment, I don't think they're going to get control over anything, and that's going to continue to hurt them. More than anything, it's going to continue to leave money on the table. They could make more money if they got in charge of it. I mean, it was funny. The amount of pessimism around Jeffrey Thorne's Green Lantern book was high on Twitter. People were very upset with him. There were videos made about him with his comments on Hal Jordan and everything else. I did that interview, and so many people were like, hey, this completely changed my perception. I'm going to give it a shot. I want to see what's going on. It added interest. I think it did some good. That kind of activity, though, can't happen from you and me. It has to happen from DC. It has to happen higher up. I mean, it's ridiculous that people who are not DC are driving a lot of the positivity or negativity of the company. And unfortunately, I don't see it changing. And I think in that regard, I would say Cherry so far is an F for me for that complete.
Yeah. I think the good news is, in my opinion, from what I've seen so far, I don't think any of those big name DC creators have really found the right project on the indies where they're going to be able to say no to the DC paycheck. If things don't work out and they need to bring some of the more established talent and put them on those characters that people know and love if they want to boost the sales. So I do think they do have that working in their favor.
It does. I mean, you look at Steve Orlando did Commanders in Crisis, and it had a really big buy for the first issue, and a lot of like, oh, he's going to be able to completely go off on his own. But then as the series played out, the numbers did not stay up at all, and it kind of went nowhere. Department of Truth is falling fast as well. I mean, so nobody's catching it yet on the indie scene.
Yep. So that is our forecast for DC Comics in 2021. We gave you the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, and we kind of broke down what we think is the most likely scenario. DC Comics sales are likely going to be just about where they were when they went into this new era. It'll be interesting because with Rebirth, with New 52, they got an enormous bump for a few months when they were the number one comic book company as far as market share, and I don't think they're going to see that with Infinite Frontier.
No, I think it's very safe to call that. Now, I'll come on and I'll be right here to say I was wrong, but I think
I'll eat some crow if I have to.
All the indicators are it's not going to repeat what happened with Rebirth. And again, one benefit to looking at the numbers as much as we have, especially over time, is that you can kind of predict very easily when things are going to go one way or another. And the most likely answer here, like you said, is they will be the number 2 company, and it will be pretty much what we had before.